Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Who Gives a Folk. And what I want to do today is one of the the first book review. Review of a book which I think is going to be of interest to people who watch this channel. Probably one of the most dramatic and groundbreaking books of the last 20 years in the 20th century, and it is Riddley Walker by Russell Hoban. It's a very unusual book. It's about a post-apocalyptic Kent set around 2,000 years after a nuclear holocaust, and it is pretty much unique in the way that the story is told. So, to give it some context and a description of how it is, so it's set 2,000 years after a nuclear holocaust. It's based in and around Kent, mainly East Kent, and it's told by a 12-year-old boy who's a storyteller, and it comes out in his dialect, his language, which is based on the oral traditions of how language could have developed 2,000 years from now. It was first published in 1980 at the time of increased tension and concerns about nuclear war, just before, of course, the big TV programs The Day After and Threads were put on the screen. C&D were very active. There was a lot of tension, probably the highest tension about nuclear war since the Cuban crisis. And it is in that context that we see this this book being released. But I think it is a story that is timeless for more than just the fear of nuclear war. It's far more than just a post-apocalypse story, an anti-bomb scare story. So 2,000 years from now, there are fragments of the old knowledge, fragments of the old science. They are the bad times, and what we see is a total juxtaposition from today, where we look back at the old times, and we're people are trying to seek the magic, the meaning, the understanding that people had 2,000-3,000 years ago, of times of the pyramids, the times of Stonehenge. We're looking back at that, wondering what knowledge they had that we've lost. In Riddley Walker, it's 2,000 years ahead, and they're looking back at our time, wondering what knowledge we had, what our science was. But of course, our knowledge and science led to nuclear war, and we restarted the whole situation. They're like living in an Iron Age settlement style living, wondering what our ancient knowledge was, what we as the ancient ones knew. And there's fragments of it which people are trying to build together to get power 2,000 years ahead. And a lot of this is developed through the Eusa plays, which are puppet plays. They travel around telling the story of Eusa and the shining one, Little Adam, who is of course the atom bomb. And it's their way of trying to tell what happened, about the bad things that happened, the bad time, through oral folklore, through oral tradition. We are the subject of that oral tradition. We are the subject of 2,000 years of manipulation, retelling, trying to pass down knowledge without the use of pen and paper. Although amazingly, they still have Rizzlers, which shows what's important, what our civilization really must hang on to, Rizzlers. So, in the narrative, Ridley's father dies. He'd been a miner, he'd been an important person, and the mantle falls on Ridley's shoulders. He's the one who's left to try and tell the stories. and he travels around visiting the different communities of East Kent, and he sees the Eusa plays, but he sees how they change from place to place, how they seem to be manipulating people, feeding to the concerns of that community, getting them on board, and he sees how little scraps of the old knowledge are slowly coming back, slowly coming together, and that's seen as actually quite a dangerous thing. Um, the powerful politicians, for want of a better word, the Prime Minister and the Westminster, which is obviously Prime Minister and Westminster, that's how those have been passed down. They are two people now who are trying to control the country, and they want to get the old secrets about gunpowder and explosives. And obviously, Ridley's a bit concerned about that. So, what we're presented with is a fairly complex tale told in this unique dialect, this unique language. The words are recognizable, but you find you have to say them out loud quite often to understand what's being said. That takes time, but it's time you spend thinking about what's being said. You can't skim read this. This isn't a book you can just read with half mind on the radio or doing the knitting or whatever else you might be wanting to do when you read. You have to concentrate. The words themselves are what are important, as is the case, of course, in oral storytelling, and that's what makes this book so different. Um, Places like Canterbury are recognisable, but are now Canterbury. Folkestone has become Folkestone. So you see how this is working. It's it's the way that the names have passed down without being written. Uh, Oddly, quite a lot of them seem to have the word arse in them, but I guess that's how folk memory is working in this book. I like the fact it's from East Kent. Obviously, there's Faversham is in it, Faversham. Uh, so that little bit of Kent patriotism comes out. That's partly why I read the book. But also the settings are recognisable. You can see where he's going on the path, the route that Ridley takes when he's walking around the different communities. It is still a recognisable Kent 2,000 years after the Holocaust. The language has just changed, but it's a compelling story. I think that it's one that you know, takes time to read, but it's worth the time. And it's nice to see us, our modern lives, as the subject of a future folk tradition, as the subject of future folk memory. It helps us to understand how people 2 or 3 thousand years ago might have been, and how we look at them, seeing somebody else look at us the same way. I think that's quite rare in literature. I don't know how this could ever be filmed. Um, it's possible. Whether or not it would work, whether or not it would lose an awful lot of its impact, or whether or not people would just be demanding subtitles, which would kind of destroy the whole point of it. But really interesting book. From a folk drama perspective, it is all about folk drama. The folk drama is told by the Eusa plays, and the Eusa plays are the subject of the story. It's a nice circular motif, um, really powerful. And it also tells us that the dynamics of power never change. Even 2,000 years after a nuclear war, the people at the top are still trying to do secrets, are still trying to manipulate people, are still trying to control, and they, of course, they're after more effective weapons, more effective destructive power. Um, that, it seems, is a constant. From 2,000 years in the future to now to probably 3,000 years ago, power is about control of the people. There's one other little thing to say about folk traditions as well. It reminds us that folk traditions aren't static, but folk tales are retold, remodeled, remoulded. They are changed to suit the time, the climate, the context. And this is something that, we always have to remember when we're looking at different folk tales, different folk stories. But whilst there's a kernel of truth in there, it's been changed to make it understandable, make the moral understandable to the listener. And it's the moral that is often more important than the detail. I think that is done very well in this book. So there we have it. Riddley Walker, because it's showing up. Yep, Riddley Walker, fascinating book, 45 years old and still very contemporary. That's it. Take care. See you next time.